it was always my idea that if people could leave cricket saying they learnt a little bit about life while they were playing cricket, we'd done our job. Because sport is something about life, and if you can't play sport and enjoy it, for my money, give it away. I went there when I was 58 and I stayed till I was 70, about 12 years, I suppose, in my latter years. Well, I felt all right. I always promised myself I'd get out if I thought I was slipping, and I reckon when I got to 70 it was time to go.
It must have been that last season you had with the riff-raff you did that broke you, I reckon.
Yeah, but no, as I said, it was the most enjoyable years of my cricket career because I'd learnt so much from coaching fellas, and I always said, I wish to Christ I'd have known as much about cricket as what they know, because I'd have been a far better cricketer and I would have enjoyed my own cricket more. But in our day, you never had that opportunity. And the only bloke that we had in our day was a fellow here, another fellow called Copper Kent, which the oval was named after up the top. He was very good with those young fellas. He was very, very good indeed. But no, I thought it was the most enjoyable time in my cricket career, those years at GPS level. And I think I was indeed fortunate. I had pretty good health. I was pretty good support from my family, able to play it with my two sons in the same side, which was a big plus. But I played with some very talented cricketers who taught me to play it the right way. So you got involved with senior cricket, and you was able to help some of the senior cricketers. And then when my fellas got into junior cricket, you coached the juniors, you coached the representative sides. And as a matter of fact, we started off the first indoor coaching place here in a hall in Newdown Park. The side I was with was North's Juniors, and we fixed up nets inside, but we could only use soft balls inside, of course, because it was a timber floor. But that was the first indoor nets they had that I know of. And we started that off here, and that lasted for a couple of years, and then as my fellows grew up, they come and played cricket where I was playing cricket, and I think my coaching just carried on from there. And you'd done your levels, your 1 and 2, and I'd done a bit of coaching around with a bloke who was an ex-state player, Graham Bizzle, who was Tommy Weber's brother-in-law. And we'd done a few coaching trips and things like that, and the level 3 course came up. I'd done the level 3 course, and that was, what happened there was that I learnt more about coaching at that time than what I'd ever thought I knew. I thought I knew a bit about it and about the game. But what we'd done, I had to do part of the, what would you say, not the practical side, but the other side of it. And I'd done it at the university here. It was for nearly 6 months, 2 or 3 nights a week for 3. And a fellow called Dr. Graham Allen took us. And I learnt more about people playing cricket and more about bloody cricket than what I'd learnt playing cricket. Because there's more, or just as much, attached to the mental side of cricket as there is to the physical side. Where I thought it helped me in the coaching was you learned to look at people. Up until that time, you tended to look not at the individual, at a team. What do we do with this team? But all of a sudden you realise, unless I get the best of that out of the individual, we're not going to have a good team. And I reckon that's what helped me so much at grammar, that all you fellas had strength, and the strengths were there. If we keep them strong and you could build up the weaknesses, all of a sudden you had good cricketers. And that's what we done. And I pass on a lot of the success we had at grammar to the time that I spent with that fellow at uni. because it gave me a different outlook on it. It's all right to go up to a fellow and say, now look, I want you to bowl this ball down there in a length, but you've got to give him a reason why he's doing it and how he's going to do it, and for what period of time we've got to do that. And it's just so important that those basics are there, and everybody's entitled to have them. And I don't think you can do it as a team overall. You've got to do a lot of it individually. And that's why that bowling machine at the grammar school was so good. That being able to take individuals on their own and work on their game, not everybody else's game, their game, and strengthen the game that they had. If you could strengthen their strengths and build up their weaknesses, all of a sudden you had a lot of good players. You didn't have to make test players out of them, but you had to get the best of their ability out of them. And I saw that happen so many times that blokes responded to it. If you're going to sort problems out of something, you've got to be able to talk to people and find out and get your message across. But I've said many times that no doubt about it, that a lot of the pathway to success that we had in cricket at grammar was the time we spent on the bowling machine. Mm. It was great, but it was great to see on the bowling machine how fellows responded to what you were trying to do without you actually having to tell them. If I'd have had to go to fellows and say, now look, we've got to do this because of this and this, you might remember and you might not. We used to spend so much time getting fellas to play off their legs. And to me, that was one of the secrets of our cricket. That I used to watch the fellas in the other team. So many of them had no idea of what to do it the right way. Got away with some of them. But when you learn to do it the right way, it becomes quite easy. We done that, and we done it, and we succeeded. But that was part of the thing. Then we had to get onto the bowling and the fielding and all those sorts of things. And then you had to get onto this part. You had to get your fellas thinking that, yes, I can handle this game. And it's a thing I think that after you leave it, like I did, you sit and think about those things, and you think, now, I just wonder as to how the boys might have felt about them being so intense in some parts of it and other parts, and did we do the right thing or didn't we? And it's pretty hard to judge because you're trying to judge so many individuals, and this was the sort of thing that Dr. Graham Allen got onto. Don't think of coaching a team, think of coaching the 10 or 12 individuals in the team. And then you'll finish up with a cricket team or a football team, whatever it be. He said, if you just think, oh, I'll coach that team, he said, no, you'll tend to take it on the same level, whereas some people are on different levels, some people learn quicker than others. And all of a sudden you start to think, well, there's so much up here between your ears that you've got to be capable of handling as a sportsman. If you're out in the middle and things aren't going real right, if you can't work out what's going wrong, you're history. You're gone. We cut out a lot of the hoo-ha that went on, of the racing around, yelling and singing out and cooing and all this sort of stuff, to allow the bowler and the fieldsman to concentrate on what they were doing. Concentration's such a big thing, but you've got to be able to concentrate properly. There's no sense in going out and trying to think. You've got to think every ball turn off. You've got to think of the things that you can do. If you're feeling, well, if that ball's over there, I'll move there, I might throw that way, I might throw, that bloke's pretty slow, I'll throw to that end. And all you fellas, whether you realise it or not, when you went on the field, you were thinking about what you were going to do in that game. Instead of the yahoo. I can still remember I used to say to you, please don't clap every ball that he bowls because that's what he's there for. And it's a case, if a fella bowled a good over, we'll congratulate him then, but there's no need to go off and throw a party for him. and I even see it today. You see it in the rugby league. Some fella scores a try and they fall all over, throw him in the air and do all sorts of. That's what he's there for. it's a strange thing. But I'd always had the feeling that you blokes who we had at cricketers, well, we not only had a responsibility to build you as a cricketer, we had to build you as a person. And to build you as a person, we had to try to think how you was thinking. And that's part of the coaching. Every cricketer who sits at that crease thinks differently. And if you could tune into the way you were thinking, the way they were thinking, it makes a hell of a difference. I think that if you go into coaching and you don't appreciate the what would you say, the outcomes you're going to have on people's lives, I doubt if you should be there, because you're in a time when you're going to be talking about their mental approach to different things and different circumstances. And if you give people the wrong impression, it can last with them for a fair while. And not only that, if they go away and they find out differently, they don't have a very good opinion of you. And I think that's we've got to teach people playing sport that the game's the important part. How you participate in it is going to make that even more so important. I think if you improve your skills, you enjoy it more. And you go home and you can say to Mum and Dad, I've done this, I've done that, I got this, or I got that. And I think we've got to realise those things in sport. I think today that young people are being pushed in sport unnecessarily, in some cases by their parents. I saw one the other night, they're involved in a fight on the field over it. I couldn't think of anything worse happening. And I think that every kid has every person has a limit to where they can get to. And I think if they understand that and the parents understand it, then all of a sudden you're going to enjoy playing sport more. If everybody thinks when I go out there I'm going to play for Australia, they're kidding themselves. But if they go out and say, I'm going to play and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to play it with my mates, they'll keep playing it. Yeah. That when you say in that period of time you didn't do so well, there had to be a reason for it. And the secret of coaching is to find that reason. And it would have been some little thing, because it's not the ability you've got, but you can't work out what's causing it, and it manifests itself. A little problem becomes a big problem, and that's getting back a bit to what I was saying about what I learned in that period of time at university with those fellas. That there's more to it than just being out in the middle and hitting a cricket ball. It's in here. 100%. And you've got to be able to sort that out. And it's not easy, because unless you've got somebody who you can talk to about it, you mightn't find the answer, because it could be some little thing that somebody else has seen that you didn't see. Like what I was saying about the number of blokes who couldn't play off their pads because they couldn't turn their back foot and didn't know they weren't doing it. Well, for a start, you had to watch as to what you're doing. And I always worked on the situation, be careful you don't try and change fellows too much, because it's that inbuilt natural ability that you've got to develop. And if you can develop that around the correct techniques and that sort of thing, you're getting there. But what's happening today, we're taking out of the game the natural ability that people have got. And if you go back and think of a fellow like Garfield Sobers and some of these blokes, if they turned up here, people would be trying to change them. And the likes of Dougie Walters and some of these blokes. And I think you've got to coach the individual. You've got to coach the talent he's got, and try to work out how far you can take it. And sometimes you can do that very easily by just correcting some of the mistakes he's making. And a a lot of people don't realise you've done that. It's a case of they think they've been doing it all the time, but they haven't been. And that was the big thing about batsmen playing off their pads. And a lot of people never thought that, well, always thought they turned their back leg, but they didn't. And until you turn that back leg, you're history. and it's like bowlers. I think that bowlers, and you'd feel yourself, at times you bowled better than others. But go back and ask yourself why. And there's probably only some little thing to it. Might have been in your run-up, might have been how you was thinking. What used to surprise me was, and you might remember back, but I used to try to get the bowlers into nets on their own and not say anything to them, just get them to bowl, and I used to mark for them. This might have been in the lead up to the first, but anyhow, you get the bowl and I'd mark where the ball landed with the little disc. And I wouldn't tell them what I was doing. They might have seen put the thing down, but I wouldn't know what for. And then I'd ask them after they'd bowled it, where did it land? And you'd be surprised, oh, it was a good length and all this sort of stuff. And they'd be so far out when I showed them where it landed that they couldn't comprehend it. And they've got to realise, and you've got to get people to realise, it took me a while to realise, it's very hard to judge distance over a flat surface. If there was a mound in the middle of the pitch, you'd be all right, you'd know how far over the mound it was. But when you're bowling on a flat surface, very, very difficult. And if you notice, even on the TV of a night in the test, they're showing blokes bowling on a length about just over halfway up the wicket, and they're saying it's a good length.
What was the hardest part about coaching coaching in general, but coaching in that first 11 years? The hardest part of your job?
It's a tough one. It's something you don't look at very much. I suppose because I've never really looked at that negative side of it, it's pretty hard to say, because you work with the talent you've got. You try to lift that talent you've got. You don't compare years to years. If you make the mistake of comparing this year's to last year's, you're going to be in all sorts of trouble, because then you're going to start comparing player to player. And I don't think I ever fell into that trap. Because what we worked on, and you'd remember, we tried to work with fellas who were coming up to first 11 standard. So you were working with them not when they got there, you were working with them before they got there, and then when they got there. So you knew the person, you knew their abilities and how far they could reach. And I don't find many negatives at all. I never struck a kid who was disrespectful. I never struck any parents who were. I think that begs well for the school. Maybe things went on behind my back I didn't know about, but it was a case. And I think if you look down at sport has to be a character builder. If you can't play sport and respect the sport, you're never going to respect the people who are playing it. I was lucky in respect, I suppose there was a couple of incidents, but I always tried to involve the parents in it as far as I could, because I reckon the way they were the ones who really brought the boys on to the standard they were, because you can't just do everything as a coach. There had to be some parental guidance behind it, whether it's practicing with them on guiding them in the way they behave and that sort of thing. And I think there was so much in that you had to respect it. And it was, and you had to be very careful that you didn't try, how would you say, to compare people with the way you played it. I always admired Wade second for the ability he had. And it was a tragedy to think that they never let him keep for Australia in front of Gilchrist because Gilchrist could bat. But Gilchrist was, I'd seen better wicket keepers at bloody club level than what Gilchrist was. And he's one of the best keepers you ever set your eyes on. He'd take catches that other people wouldn't get there. And he never played a test match. And it was a tragedy because there's no risk in the world. He was so far ahead of the rest of the keepers in Australia that he should have been the first fella picked in the team. And I always said that to any coaches when I used to hold coaching. If you ever pick a team, be very careful how you pick it. And the first fella you pick's your wicket keeper because you know you're going to pick the best one. You're not going to pick some fella because he can bat a bit. And then go down as to how you're going to pick your cricket team. You pick your wicket keeper first and you'll get the best one. If you leave him till last, which some of them do, and that's what would have happened with they'd have picked the side with the batsmen and bowlers and said, oh, well, we haven't got a wicket. Oh, Gilchrist can keep, he can keep. Not Wade second's a better keeper than Gilchrist. Put him in. And he was. I saw him take some amazing catches at GPS level. As a matter of fact, I had a photo of one. I reckon he was this high off the ground catching it up there. Sort of things that a lot of fellas would never get near. But what I found, I reckon that why the first 11 players were so successful, it was in that years you've got in those formative years where you were able to make changes. I can remember talking to Martin Love one day, and you never saw Martin square cut much or hook much. And I said to Martin one day, we were taking some photos of him and had him square cut. I said to Martin, I hardly ever see you play a square cut. Too risky. He played his game in where he felt so confident. As he got into his innings, look out if you bowl short him, he'd hook and cut you. And that's the way he played. It was all in here. And that's what people have got to realise. There's so much of the game is played between your ears as with the bat in your hand. And it's.
Is he the best batsman you coached?
Oh, without any risk in the world about it. I don't think Martin ever got the notoriety he was entitled to. I don't think he played enough cricket for Australia. I think there was a lot of people who might have been pleased to see him disappear somewhere because I can remember he got 100 in a test match and the next match they dropped him. It was absolutely crazy. And some of the scores that he'd got in interstate cricket would have demanded that he play for Australia. And no, he was... He was, I hate to use the word freak, but he was an absolute talent as far as that goes. And it took me a couple of matches to work out why he was so bloody good. But I sat up in the bank at the end of Mills Oval there one day and I thought, I'm going to sit and watch. And I'm satisfied myself that he picked the ball up those split second earlier than other people. And he was able to make that decision so much quicker. And he let the ball come to him. You never saw Martin reaching for the ball. The ball always come to Martin.
What advice do you have for coaches today?
Respect the game and respect the player. I think there's a lot of fellas in coaching who don't show respect for the game. They're treating junior cricket as a what would you say, a real contest between two players instead of something you're playing for enjoyment. And I think we've got to get that out, it's a participation game. You play it to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, don't play the damn thing.
What about some advice just for for people, for life in general?
Well, that's a pretty hard one too, because everybody lives their life differently, because they're all governed by circumstances as to how you live your life. I think there's a lot of people who are never able to gain what they want to gain in life because circumstances have stopped it, and it's very hard to judge people. I think you've got to judge people by the way they treat you, and I think that's the best judgment you can make. If people treat you well and you treat them well, you're doing okay. If you move away from that, you're painting yourself into a big corner. But it's pretty hard. There's a lot of people who grow up in very difficult circumstances who never get the opportunity to display just how good they are at certain things. I'd just like them to think that I treated everybody who played with respect, that I didn't try to show favouritism as far as favouritism. I felt that everybody deserved a fair go, and if you were good enough to get there, I'd try and get you there. And it was nice as a legacy to know that we'd won some GPS championships, but really when you get down to it, what does that mean? I think that if you look at it and say, did the blokes who we played in those games, did they enjoy playing them? All of a sudden you're looking to get the right answer. Because if you can't play sport to enjoy it, don't play it. It has to be enjoyment. Well, if you asked me to tell you the teams that were successful and won premiership, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even tell you exactly who were in that team. But you remember people like Martin Love because they stood out, Lachlan Stevens and Tommy Gard and these fellas, and there was no risk in the world. Had Jason Little have stuck to cricket, he'd have played international cricket too. But it's a case of that. There's so many things stand out over that period of time, and so many people, and you've got to. What I've tried to not do is try to think too much of how good Martin Love was as against. There was a lot of blokes playing first 11 cricket who really played above their ability, and you had to respect them in everything they'd done, whether it was fielding or bowling or batting, or wicketkeeping, whatever. I think there was a lot of fellas who really put everything into it to make themselves that little bit better in a team.
If I hand you one of these,
yeah,
what's the first thing you think of?
I think of the, what would you say, of the high standard of people I met who wore it. And that was something that stood out. I don't think I ever struck anybody who wore that cap who didn't show respect for what it was and to what it represented. And I think that's very important. I don't remember if I ever pushed that, but I always felt that if you couldn't respect the game and who you was playing the game for, you shouldn't be in it. And I always felt that the blokes who wore that cap showed the utmost respect for the game and the utmost respect for their school. And after all, that's what the game's about. And you probably mightn't remember, but I used to try to think that just before we started on our cricket, my main topic to fellas was, if you're going to play it, enjoy it. And I think that's something that you fellas at Grammar did. You enjoyed your cricket. But no, it brings back great times, great memories.